stamping and crafting friends. Welcome to Melissa's Crafting Treehouse. Today I've got a simple card that uses paper scraps. I'll be using the Christmas season and tidings and trimmings stamp sets. The Christmas season set can be purchased alone or as part of a bundle with the seasonal labels dies. Do you ever wonder about what to do with paper scraps from your paper crafting projects? If so, you're going to love seeing my project today. I don't know about you, but I have tons of strips of white cardstock scraps. I hate to waste, so I'm always on the lookout for what to do with paper scraps, especially when I have a bunch of the same size. For today's club project, I've used 5/8 inch strips for the stamped pieces and for the sentiment piece as well. This is one of 3 current Stamp Club projects. Stamp Club members get a free class to go every other month, complete with project kits in the mail to make 2 each of 3 different designs. Club members also get free Stampin' Up! Products from me at the end of the club cycle. Plus, you can sign up anytime to join a club. For details about my online Stampers Club program, make sure to check out the link in the video description below. I'm going to get started by stamping on my strips of cardstock. Now I've got a stack here of strips that measure 5/8 inch wide, and I'm just grabbing 6 of those. They're eventually going to get mounted onto that piece of garden green cardstock. And I'm going to use some temporary adhesive on my work surface and just lay out my strips of cardstock. Another alternative is to put your strips of cardstock onto a silicone craft mat with permanent adhesive to begin with, which will save you a step in the end. So I'm going to start with stamping these 2 images that are intended to lay one over the other. I'll be stamping the background image using my soft succulent ink pad, and then I'll be overlaying that smaller image over the top using my evening evergreen ink pad. Now this image is really the showcase foliage, if you will, for this piece. It's the most intricate of the images and it will stand out the most, and that's part of why I'm starting with it. The fact that it has 2 layers to create the full image gives it a lot of dimension and interest, and that's why I wanted it to be the most prominent image for my background piece. Next, I'm going to be using my soft seafoam to stamp that largest foliage image. I wanted this one to sort of fade into the background a little bit, so I chose the lightest color for it, especially since it's the biggest stamp. Now here I'm pointing out that I sort of inked up my stamp a little bit too robustly. I pressed it onto the ink pad, and so ink got in between the shapes. So the way to avoid that is to just press a little bit more gently onto the ink pad when you ink it up instead of pressing so hard. So now I'm coming in with my Pear Pizzazz ink with the stems for the berries. And for each of these images, I'm attempting to fit in 3 of each. Now before I stamp my red berries, I'm going to use one other image with my Pear Pizzazz, and I'm showing that right here. And now I'm ready to stamp my real red berries. Now getting this image lined up has a little trick to it. As you can see, there's 3 little berries at the top and then sort of a single rogue one at the bottom. And that's how I remember how to line it up. When you do it, it's also best to overlap your berries ever so slightly on the green stem so you don't risk that they're going to be floating on top of them instead. You want them to look like they're attached. So for that bottom set of berries, if I was zooming in, you would be able to see that they are sort of floating on top. So I'm going to stamp them again and stamp them just a little bit lower down. It'll just make those berries look a little bit bigger, but still just fine. Now I've got a few little sort of empty spots or gaps in my pattern on the left right there and on the right and on the top. So I'm going to come in with the image that I used earlier. I've washed it, and I'm going to use a little garden green with that image to fill in those spots. And now I've finished all of my stamping. Now you can see here I'm showing a demonstration where I use the silicone craft mat to do my stamping, and because it's sort of rubbery around the outside edge, it's not going to absorb the ink, so it's important that you wipe it off the edges before you start messing with pulling up those pieces. Otherwise you can get ink on your fingers and then get ink in places where you don't want it to be. So the next thing I'm going to do is start attaching my strips to my piece of garden green cardstock. Now, keep in mind, if you've done it the way I demonstrated, you'll only have temporary adhesive on the back sides of your strips, so you'll need to add adhesive to each piece. If you did it on the silicone craft mat, you'll have the permanent adhesive on there already. Either way, the best way I've found to do this is to lay my pieces out without pressing them down to get my spacing first, because I do want to have those strips evenly spaced so that the left and the right and in between each of the strips will have the same amount of garden green showing. Now we will be trimming off either the top or the bottom of our piece at the end. I didn't leave an edge of garden green at the top or the bottom intentionally, so you'll want to justify your strips either to the top or the bottom. I am justifying mine to the bottom of my garden green piece and leaving a little extra space on the top. That will get trimmed off when I'm finished. So after each of my pieces is exactly where I want them to be, I'll just put adhesive in behind each of the strips and attach them, and I'm all done. Then I'm just going to take my piece and trim off the top ever so slightly to remove that excess green, and I'll be trimming that down to 3 7/8 by 5 1/8 in the end. So the next thing I'm going to do is stamp and assemble my sentiment piece. I'm using a piece of white cardstock, again, that measures 5/8 of an inch wide, and I'm going to stamp my sentiment with real red ink. Next I'm going to use my paper snips to cut a shallow banner in the end of this piece. So I'm cutting just a little bit up the center of my piece of white cardstock, and then I'll cut in from the points to that center point to create my banner. You can make your banner as shallow or as deep as you wish. I'm going to use the same method to cut shallow banners from my two other strips of cardstock, my garden green and evening evergreen. These are all 3 inches long, and in the end I'll be trimming them down to be different lengths based upon how I want to configure my sentiment element. After my other 2 banners are cut, I'm going to use glue dots to attach the 3 pieces one to the other. I'm going to start with putting a glue dot on the back side of my white sentiment piece, and then I'm going to attach it to the garden green piece in behind. I am going to make the garden green piece a little bit longer than the white piece in my arrangement, and then I'm going to put a glue dot in behind my garden green piece and just slip in my evening evergreen small banner, and it's going to be the shortest of the 3. You can see I have a little bit of excess cardstock on the left side. I'm just going to trim off any excess that I don't want. Now for my finished card, I've used a slightly different ribbon arrangement. For the one I'm going to assemble today, I'm going to be replacing my soft succulent open weave ribbon with some gold shimmer ribbon. As you can see, I've taken that ribbon and cut it down the middle the long way so that it's half as wide, and I've taken a piece of red ribbon and a piece of the evening evergreen open weave ribbon and done the same thing with those. So I have 3 thin strips of ribbon that I'll be tying around my garden green piece. Now I'm just going to go ahead and trim down my stamped piece so that again it's 3 7/8 by 5 1/8, and it doesn't have any garden green at the top and bottom, but it does have a little bit on the left and the right. Now tying these 3 ribbons can be a little bit challenging, so I have a little tip for you to make it a bit easier. And I will be showing 2 different ways to do the ribbon for this card. The second one may be a little bit easier, but I'm going to show you how I originally did it, and then you have the option to do it whatever you want. So first you're going to want to layer your ribbons one on top of the other to sort of rein them in and get them in control, if you will. And then I've used a binder clip on the right side, and then I'm going to put another one on the left side. And that's just to hold them together so they're one on top of the other. Now I want my tie to be on the left-hand side when I tie my knot. So I want to plan where my ribbon placement is with that in mind. So I'm just going to start by wrapping that ribbon around the garden green cardstock and taking the binder clip and attaching it to the right side, and then I'm going to do the same thing on the left side. That way your ribbon is held down and it's a little bit easier to tie the knot I'm about to tie. So I'm just going to now grab onto both ends of my ribbons, trying to line them up one on top of the other to keep them in control, and then I'm just sliding the tails of one into the opening. I'll pull my tails tight, and then my knot is all set. Now it is a little bit challenging to keep a hold of all 3 ribbons at the same time while you do this. So I am again going to show another alternative way to create this ribbon element that might be a little bit simpler. Now I'm also going to adjust the positioning of my pieces by bowing my cardstock and then separating out the individual pieces of ribbon so you can see all 3 colors on both edges. And then I can also bow it in order to move the positioning of the knot if I like. And now I'm just going to trim off the ends. Now when you cut your ribbon down the center like this, you'll find that there are little filaments or strings that you can pull out of the ribbon itself to give it some added texture. On the card that's sitting on the table right there, you may be able to see the little red filaments or hairs that I've pulled out of the ribbon. Now once the ribbon is all set, you can just attach some dimensionals on the back side and then go ahead and put this whole piece onto your Evening Evergreen card base. So before I finish up with the final assembly on this card, I wanted to share a little snippet of the Zoom event that I did with my club, where I showed them an alternative way to attach the ribbons that is a little bit easier. So in this case, I've taken individual small segments of each color of ribbon and attached them around the back side of my garden green piece one at a time. So here I've got some glue dots on the left and right on the back side of my garden green piece, and I'm just taking the piece of gold ribbon and wrapping it around the back side on the left and now on the right. Now I'm putting it on sort of at an angle to attempt to get the same sort of fanned out shape that I have with my ribbon on the original design. So now I've got my Evening Evergreen open weave ribbon, and I've attached that piece around the back side. And now I've got my third piece, the red satin ribbon, attaching it around the right, and then I'm needing another glue dot on the back to get it to attach. And I'm fanning out the pieces as I go. And then I'm just attaching that real red piece of ribbon on the left side. Now with the remaining pieces of the 3 ribbons, I'm going to go ahead and do a simple knot. The shape of the tails will be slightly different doing it this way, but it works just fine. You just need to put your finger onto the knot itself and kind of pull the tails down to get them into the shape that you like. And then you'll just go ahead and trim off that excess ribbon and you're good to go. So just like with the other version, I'm going to put my dimensionals on the back side of this piece and attach it to the front of my card. I'm also adding a small piece of tear and tape to straddle the ends of the ribbons on both sides, just to help hold it down. I will not remove the backings of that tear and tape. It's really just to hold the ribbon. Now for the final assembly of my card, I've got some dimensionals on the back side of my banner piece. I'm going to attach the top of the banner using a glue dot underneath the knot that I've created with my ribbon. But the bottom is going to be attached with dimensionals so that it has a bit of a raised look, as if it's sort of hanging there. And so now all I need to do is put my glue dots at the top of the banner, remove the backings of my dimensional pieces, and simply attach it in behind the knot. And my card is all done. As a reminder, this is one of 3 of the current Stampers Club projects. If you'd like to receive free classes to go in the mail, plus free Stampin' Up! Products, you may want to join my online Stampers Club. To learn more, click on the little I in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, or click on the link in the video description below. I hope you enjoyed my project today, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with friends, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thanks for spending some time with me today, and happy crafting!